You know that feeling, right? Standing outside a door, it's locked, feels familiar, deeply personal, but also strange. Maybe a dim hallway, cold air, your hand on the solid brass knob, and you wake up and you just know, deep down, whatever's behind that door, well, that's the thing you're working so hard not to look at.
That image, that door, that's the psyche speaking quite directly sometimes. We're not really here today to decode every little symbol like a puzzle. It's more about exploring the, let's say, the internal architecture that creates that recurring image. It really circles back to that classic idea dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. And that locked door, it's such a powerful, persistent metaphor for what we've pushed out of our conscious awareness, what we have exiled.
It really is a strange feeling, being both the one who locked it and the one standing outside wanting in, or maybe dreading getting in. So our mission today, for you listening, is to try and understand the mechanics of this. What is the unconscious whispering or maybe shouting through this image? Why do we lock certain things away? And why won't our own minds just let us forget about the key, you know?
Well, the core mechanism is repression. And we often think of repression as just, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
But it's not passive like that. The sources we look at really highlight it as an active, ongoing effort, almost like performing psychic surgery on yourself, but without any anesthetic. You identify a feeling, could be grief, intense shame, maybe a longing that feels unacceptable, and you cut it out. You stitch the conscious self back together, hoping it holds.
Okay, but if we've cut it out, why does it keep knocking? Why does the dream keep dragging us back to that same locked door, that threshold?
Because, as one insight puts it, unfinished business doesn't rot, it echoes. It takes enormous psychic energy to keep that material buried. And the insight for you, the listener, is really crucial here. The price for that temporary conscious calm is often chronic unconscious suffering. And that suffering, it leaks out. It shows up as symptoms, maybe physical ones, or those slips in the tongue, or these powerful repeating dreams about the door.
Right, and it's so important to get this. Locking it away wasn't a mistake initially, was it? It was actually kind of brilliant, an act of survival. Absolutely, that's key. The core feelings behind that door. Almost always things that felt dangerous back in childhood. We learned early on, maybe implicitly. Expressing anger, that might lead to abandonment. Showing desire, that brings shame. Being vulnerable, that just leads to getting hurt. So repression was the mind's best strategy at the time, to stay safe, to stay connected, to be accepted. The unconscious, through the dream now, isn't trying to destroy us. It's actually trying to make us whole again, trying to reintegrate those parts we had to exile to survive back then.
Okay, that makes sense. But if the unconscious wants us to know the truth, why all the secrecy? Why the weird symbols like peeling wallpaper or strange lighting? Why not just a clear message, like a memo saying, hey, you're still angry about X?
That's the fascinating part. That's the trauma by it, the dream work. It's the mind's labor, you could say. It has to disguise the raw truth, the latent content before it can deliver it. Nothing in the dream is truly random, but the symbols, the way things get condensed or displaced, it's necessary. Because the unfiltered truth, it could actually shatter the fragile piece of your conscious life. The symbols are there to protect the ego, the part of you managing daily reality.
Okay, let's make that more concrete, that encryption. Take a common image, like peeling wallpaper in that dim hallway you mentioned earlier. What might that be masking?
Peeling wallpaper. It often signifies something fraying. It's like a visual cue, that the story you tell yourself, the conscious narrative about being fine, being okay, it's starting to come undone at the edges. It might point to the exact moment you stopped speaking up about something important, or when a crucial truth was first suppressed.
Or what about that other common one, hearing a child crying, but it's distant, maybe in a room you can't quite get into?
Oh, that's a poignant one. That's usually the part of you that's still waiting to be seen, to be held, to be acknowledged. It's the vulnerable self, the one you exiled. Still in distress, still needing something, and demanding, finally, to be recognized.
And the key. The dream where you know you have the key, but you just can't find it in the dark.
That's often about permission. The permission you refuse to grant yourself. Permission to feel something fully, perhaps. Or permission to want something you've told yourself you shouldn't. Or maybe even the permission to pursue the very truth that lies behind that door. The truth that could belong, your own next chapter. The dream shows you the lock, implying you had the key, even if you feel like you've lost it.
This really highlights the internal conflict, doesn't it? The whole surreal dreamscape. If the ego is the censor, how does this map onto that basic Freudian model, the id? Ego, superego, where do they fit in this locked hallway drama?
Exactly. That's where the tension lives. The dream itself is often fueled by the id, the source of our raw, primal drives. Desire, fear, instinct. Impulses that, if just acted out directly, might cause total chaos, socially or internally. Then you have the superego. That's the inner critic, the harsh moral judge. It's the internalized voice of parents, society, all those shoulds and shouldn'ts. It's constantly issuing prohibitions. Thou shalt not feel that. Thou shalt not want that.
So the ego is stuck in the middle, basically trying to keep the peace, like a stressed out diplomat.
Precisely. The ego is the fragile manager trying to navigate this. It has to somehow satisfy the id's urges in acceptable ways, while also appeasing the superego's strict rules. Its primary job, even while we sleep, is to keep us functioning, to maintain stability. And it does this censoring work through those dream mechanisms, condensing multiple fears into one symbol, displacing anger onto a less threatening object, creating those symbolic, often bizarre images. That locked door, fundamentally, it represents every boundary the ego has drawn around your own heart to survive that internal civil war. Every I shouldn't, every it's too late, every I can't.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to the guards, the ones stationed right at that door, the defense mechanisms. It feels important to frame them, as you said, not as flaws, but as these incredible fortresses built by a younger self needing to survive something unbearable.
That shift in perspective is absolutely essential. These defenses aren't pathologies, they're ingenious adaptations. They keep truths that feel unbearable safely at bay. But when that repressed truth starts pushing against the door, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It often manifests as a symptom, which is really a kind of compromise, isn't it? A coded message between the hidden impulse wanting out and the ego demanding silence.
Can you ground that in everyday life? What does that kind of compromise look like for an adult today?
Sure. Think about chronic physical tension. Maybe the persistent knot in your stomach, or a sudden migraine right before a big meeting or a difficult conversation. That's often the body speaking, the anxiety the mind refuses to consciously name or process. It's a physical symptom holding an emotional truth. Or consider seemingly trivial anger, that sudden burst of rage at your partner maybe, for leaving a dish in the sink. Seems way out of proportion, right? That could very well be the return of rage you had to swallow when you were, say, 7 years old, because you learned back then that showing anger meant losing connection, losing safety. The symptom, the tension, the outburst, it's the unconscious knocking. Politely at first, maybe, then louder and louder until hopefully you start to listen.
Okay, let's unpack some of those specific guardians, those defenses. First up, what do the sources mean by resistance? Sounds quite active.
It is active. Resistance is maybe the clearest proof that the unconscious is fighting tooth and nail to keep things hidden. It's not just forgetting, it's an act of avoidance. Practically speaking, it can show up as suddenly getting bored when a difficult topic comes up, or maybe intellectualizing, turning deep raw pain into a detached abstract theory. In daily life, it could be repeatedly forgetting therapy appointments or finding you just can't seem to remember your dreams anymore, especially the significant ones. It's the system pushing back.
Okay, if resistance is the general pushback, then projection feels like a specific tactic, a way to manage feelings like guilt or shame by putting them elsewhere.
Exactly. Projection is like a psychic sleight of hand. It's quite clever, in a way. You take in aspects of yourself that you find unacceptable, maybe intense anger or envy or a feeling of inadequacy, and you attribute it to someone else. You see it out there in a colleague, a political figure, even a friend. It's not me who's secretly furious, it's them who are so aggressive. It allows you to keep that exiled part at a safe distance where you can judge it or attack it instead of having to own it in here.
So hang on, if I find myself constantly seeing other people as, say, really critical or judgmental, I should probably take a look inwards at what criticism or judgment I might be refusing to own in myself.
Precisely. That's often the clue. The strong emotional charge you feel about something out there is frequently powered by something unrecognized in here.
Yeah.
The focus is external, but the energy, the source, is internal. That's the telltale sign of projection at work.
Okay. Next, there's reaction formation, which seems almost bizarre, where we end up acting the complete opposite of how we actually feel deep down.
It is quite extreme. It's an intense overcorrection. Reaction formation means building this rigid, sometimes quite loud monument to the exact opposite of the repressed truth. Think of the person who insists, maybe a little too forcefully, "Oh, I never get angry," but you can almost feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. Or someone who is almost compulsively, performatively selfless, or perhaps drowning in unspoken resentment and unmet needs. It's like a desperate attempt to convince not just the outside world, but also the internal superego, that the dangerous feeling simply doesn't exist. It creates this internal prison built from the opposite material.
Wow, that sounds exhausting just thinking about it. And then there's displacement. This seems more about redirecting the heat, the emotional energy.
Yes, Displacement is about shifting the intensity of an emotion from its original, often threatening target onto a safer one, a substitute target. So maybe you can't express your rage towards your intimidating boss without risking your job. So you go home and find yourself yelling at your kids for spilling juice or snapping at your partner over something really minor. The powerful energy of the original impulse, the rage at the boss, gets transferred or displaced onto a target that feels less risky, less likely to cause catastrophic consequences for your ego or your life.
And that sounds related to the compulsion to repeat, but you mentioned needing to distinguish them clearly. Displacement is about the target now, whereas repetition is bigger.
That's a really critical distinction, yes. Displacement is shifting the feeling or the intensity onto a safer target in the present moment. The compulsion to repeat, which really drives transference, is much broader and more profound. It's about shifting the entire relationship dynamic, the whole script, onto new people in your current life. You don't just passively remember the past, you unconsciously, actively relive it. You find yourself recreating old patterns, perhaps constantly seeking approval from emotionally distant figures, just like a parent was. Or maybe testing partners for abandonment, unconsciously hoping that this time, this new person will provide a different healing outcome, a different ending to the old story.
So the psyche gets stuck in this loop like a scratched record, trying desperately to master an old wound, but because it's unconscious, we just keep playing out the same painful script, often making things worse. It keeps leading us back to that locked door with the same old fear.
Precisely. The repetition is the unconscious crying out for mastery, for integration. It'll keep running that loop, keep casting new people in old roles, until you can pause, become conscious of the pattern, and realize, wait a minute, I'm not just reacting to this person in front of me now. I'm reacting to the ghost of my father or my mother or that caregiver from long ago.
Okay, so eventually, the goal isn't just understanding the lock and the guards intellectually. It's about turning the key somehow. But if we've spent a lifetime building this fortress, isn't there a danger in trying to tear down that door too quickly? What's the risk of pushing too hard for integration?
That is the essential paradox, really, of this kind of deep dive. The real work isn't about breaking down the door with violence or force. It's actually about surrendering the fight against it. It's about being willing to sit down before that door, acknowledge the defenses, maybe even thank them for the job they did in keeping you safe back then, and then finally, gently, just listening for what's behind it. If you try to force it open, if you push too hard, the defense system, the resistance we talked about, it will likely just get stronger. It will double down.
So, the real encounter, the moment of integration, it's not about fixing something broken. It's when the repressed stuff returns, not as a weird symptom or a confusing dream, but as a felt presence. What does that actually feel like?
It feels like recognition, mostly. Not analysis, not fixing, but a deep, often quiet recognition. You metaphorically pushed the door open and you encountered the self you had to exile. Often people visualize this as their younger self, that small, perhaps silent child who felt everything fully, without apology, before the world taught them not to. And integration means allowing that flood of stored sensations, maybe the sting of an old rejection, the heat of buried shame, the ache of unmet longing to be felt right here, right now, as present reality. Because in the unconscious, time isn't linear. It's all just living truth.
And I think this is the crucial reframe, isn't it? Realizing what that locked door was actually for. It wasn't there to keep some terrifying monster out.
No. Exactly. It was built to keep the real self, the messy, contradictory, desiring, fiercely feeling, vulnerable self, safely in. Locked away. We learned, often very young, that we had to lock parts of ourselves away to be safe, to be accepted, to be loved by the important people in our early world. But the price we paid for that safety was our own internal aliveness, our wholeness.
So the integration, then, isn't about becoming perfect or getting rid of the bad parts. It's more like the practice of sitting with all of it, the whole contradictory chaos inside the child's rage, the adult's longing, the fear, the joy, and just accepting it without the shame, without the apologies.
Yes, that's beautifully put. The dream stops being a scary riddle you have to solve.
Yeah.
And becomes more like a relationship, a developing relationship with the parts of yourself you had to abandon. And you start to reclaim your present moment when you stop living entirely in the shadow of what you buried back then.
So, wrapping this up, what does this mean for the ongoing journey? Because as you said earlier, this kind of work, it's never really done, is it?
No, it's not. And that's okay. The unconscious isn't some problem you solve and then file away neatly. It's more like a wellspring, a source of depth and energy to be lived from ongoingly. Even when one major door opens, when one core truth is integrated, you'll likely find other doors down the hallway, new exiles perhaps, unmet desires that surface. The goal isn't a final cure, but rather adopting this continuous practice, the practice of returning to yourself again and again, especially to the difficult parts, with a kind of fierce compassion and saying essentially, okay, I'm here now, I see you, and I'm not leaving you alone again.
The key is in your hand, listener. It always was. The invitation is maybe. Don't rush back so quickly to the performance of being okay, the performance you might have built using displacement or reaction formation just to get by. Instead, maybe choose, even just for moments, to explore living in the full, complex, sometimes contradictory reality of your inner world, because that's where wholeness actually waits.